It's Holocaust Memorial Day on Friday, but the role sandwich played in that dreadful period of history never gets told. This town helped save thousands of Jews from certain death.
Countries didn't want penniless German refugees who were overrun with them. France and Italy and even England.
It's sheer luck or misfortune, if you like, who got out and who didn't get out.
It became apparent to most of us much later in life how lucky we've been, how very, very lucky we've been.
To you and I, this looks like an ordinary industrial estate on the outskirts of Sandwich.
But don't be fooled by its appearance today. This land has a remarkable and little-known history that matters a great deal to a huge number of people around the world.
In 1939, this was a derelict military base called the Kitchener Camp, named after Viscount Kitchener, the talismanic face of the most famous recruitment poster of all time. It was a relic of the First World War, but just before the outbreak of the Second World War, it enjoyed a new lease of life when it became a home for thousands of German and Austrian men.
But these men weren't soldiers. They were refugees, desperate to escape the death camps of Nazi Germany.
The lives of more than 4,000 men were saved by the Kitchener Camp, and yet there's precious little sign that it ever existed.
So how did so many German and Austrian men end up in this corner of England just before the Second World War? How did the locals react? What happened to all the men once war broke out? And why do so few people today know the extraordinary story of the Kitchener Camp?
Monica Lowenberg's father would not have got out of Nazi Germany if it hadn't been for the Kitchener Camp. Today she's come to see what's left of a place that so warmly welcomed him more than 70 years ago.
They didn't speak any English, the boys, and yet the local people came to visit them and invited them round for afternoon tea. When you come from an experience where you've been ostracised and made to feel as if you're dirt, you're not even human, to come to a country where people don't know you and are not Jewish and are just people living in the local area and welcome you, I think that restores some faith in humanity.
Only a few of the youngest refugees are still alive today. Men like Felix Bernal and Monica's father, Ernest Lowenberg.
Kitchener Camp, Richmond, Kent, August 39.
And Harry Rosny. Harry was one of the first to come to the Kitchener Camp. He was 19 and had spent his entire teenage life living in fear of the Nazi regime.
One took care not to be noticed. And that was the 6.5 years under Hitler, even on the streets or anywhere. Don't stand up and speak what you really felt like saying. You would have had your face smashed in, you see, so I didn't. Simple as that.
On the night of the 9th of November 1938, the persecution came to a head. The Nazis smashed up Jewish homes and businesses, leaving pavements strewn with broken glass. It came to be known as Kristallnacht, or Crystal Night.
We were lucky, we were advised to stay at home and keep quiet and don't go out. But my father, who was in Gleiwitz, where I came from, he was taken to Buchenwald concentration camp.
Thousands of Jewish men over 18 were arrested and thrown into one of 3 concentration camps, Buchenwald, Sachsenhausen and Dachau.
Quite a few have never returned because they were murdered, they were killed. And the ones who managed to get out could only do so under the promise that they would leave Germany forthwith.
Felix's father didn't need any more convincing.
When he came out of concentration camp, his hair shorn off, and he said, out, there's no future in Germany.
Every Jewish man was given the same ultimatum. Thousands had no choice but to leave their families behind and flee to a foreign land.
The belief was that wives and children would escape from the Nazi regime at a later date. No one thought they would be harmed. So many of the men who came here firmly believed it was only a matter of time before they were reunited with their families.
If you had cash or connections, getting out of Germany wasn't a problem. But for those without prospects, money or relatives abroad, the doors to other countries were firmly shut. But wealthy American and British Jews wanted to help. They donated money to the Central British Fund for German Jewry, which was frantically searching for somewhere to house thousands of men. Claire Ungerson lives in Sandwich and has been researching how the Kitchener camp was chosen. It was all down to an architect called Ernest Joseph.
He remembered that there was this First World War camp in Sandwich because he had designed, when he was a younger man, the NAFI, the dining and cooking facilities and so on. The intention of the camp organisers was that the camp should really house men who otherwise would never have got here. They were butchers and bakers and candlestick makers, shopkeepers, commercial artists, orchestral players from the less good orchestras. They would never have got here if it hadn't been for the Kitchener camp. And of course that means that they would have been slaughtered.
Refugees began to arrive in March 1939 and were immediately put to work making the camp habitable so that more men could come.
The whole place reeked of neglect, and things had to be done to bring it up to date.
We dug ditches, we made roads.
Doing water and lights and whatever, just building a camp.
There wasn't time to be idle.
As soon as we got an old hut ready, 48 people could come out and live there.
The camp was organised with typical German efficiency. They even found time to produce their own magazine. It shows what life was like in the camp and also reveals how grateful the men were for the warm reception they got from the people of Sandwich.
We were invited for tea. We were told to only speak when you're spoken to. Keep your hands to yourself and don't ask for anything and say please and thank you. They were very nice ladies who did the very best, very typically British in a way, with hindsight.
There were an awful lot of people in Sandwich who'd probably never been further than Dover, had probably never been to London, and suddenly there were all these cosmopolitans on the edge of Sandwich.
Hilda Keene's parents ran the Golden Crust Bakery. When she came home from school one day, it was full of polite but demanding German-speaking customers.
They said to my mother, Mrs. Kimber, you should make proper coffee, you should buy ground coffee, and you should put it in a bag and you should have an urn. And so she did that, and the shop became very popular. And everyone who came there, they were all lovely people.
We had actors, we had musicians, we gave concerts. The people in Sandwich came to our concerts, and we had language courses of any language under the sun. There was always somebody who could speak a language.
The men held their free concerts at the camp. Another Sandwich schoolgirl, Nancy Palmer, remembers them fondly.
I can remember going into this hall. It wasn't very big, and all the chairs set out for people to sit in rows. And the stage, I think, was possibly made of trestle tables or something. You know, it wasn't nothing posh about it at all. The musicians just came onto the stage and sat, there were about 6 of them. And I'd not really heard any classical music. And to hear that was absolutely wonderful.
And what did they play?
Eine kleine Nacht music, and I still love it.
They had all sorts of talented people at the camp, and one of them was a photographer.
Stella Curzon visited the Kitchener camp too. Her father was the postmaster. Today, Stella has decided to tell her grandchildren all about it.
Do you think he actually enjoyed his time in the camp? Do you think he liked
We were safe.
England?
He was safe. You know, to be safe was such a big thing.
Stella got out of Austria 5 days before the war started. She was allowed to come to England thanks to 2 local ladies who were teaching her father English at the camp.
They'd heard that he needed somebody to guarantee a home to his daughter as a means of getting a visa to live in England. So these wonderful ladies offered me a home, and my mother then came over at the same time as I did on a domestic visa, it was called.
Another person who made it safely to Sandwich was a Mrs. Rosenberg. Her husband had sent a short message to Germany telling her, go to the Golden Crust Bakery, Sandwich.
My parents gave up their bedroom for her and for her husband to come and stay with her. And they did that stayed there for several weeks. And we children all pushed up into our beds, you know, so it was to make room for everybody.
Just like the Rosenbergs, Felix and Ernest had been lucky. Their Jewish school had 200 pupils wanting to relocate to England. In August 1939, they went to the British consulate in Berlin to have their passports stamped with a transit visa.
Half of them got stamped, and I'm one of them, so I'm sitting here. The other half was supposed to get it within 4 weeks. Well, we left Germany on the 29th of August, 1939.
War broke out 5 days later. For the 100 boys left behind, escape was now impossible.
The remaining 100 boys never made it, and they perished in the Holocaust.
It was pure chance. There was no rhyme, no reason for it. It just war broke out and cut everything in half, I mean.
For the Kitchener camp men still trying to get their families out of Germany, the situation was now desperate.
The others who married men left their family behind, very heavy in their soul, very morose, very depressed most of the time.
Eva Mendelssohn's father was one of those men. A former German soldier, he was now trying everything he could to get his family to England. But the Nazis were about to take them east to Poland. Eva's mother decided to go alone, believing her children might still have a chance of escaping.
She knew the east, and she knew that meant certain death, and that's why she didn't take us with. I mean, she didn't do it lightly. People had to plead with her to leave us behind, but she did it. Many mothers didn't do that, and those people perished, those children perished.
Eva and her sister Miriam were hidden until after the war, when they were reunited with their father in England. Records show that her eldest sister, Esther, was killed at Auschwitz in 1944 at the age of 18. Her mother had been murdered there 2 years earlier.
She gave me my life twice, and my sister. But once when we were born, and this time when she left us behind. Some people might have felt that they were being, left behind. What a terrible thing for a mother to do, but I think it's the greatest thing she could have done.
In total, 572 children of the men at the Kitchener camp never escaped the Nazi regime. According to detailed records, more than half were murdered in the Holocaust. What became of the others is unknown. By the time German bombs were pounding the southeast in the summer of 1940, the Kitchener refugee camp was empty. The British government had decided that having 4,000 foreign men on the coast was a bad idea. So the refugees were given the chance to join the British Army. Felix, Harry and 3,000 others signed up.
I was first in and last out, 6.5 years of it, in British Army, because it was essentially Nazis and Germany had to be defeated.
Ernest went to Leeds to work in an aircraft factory.
And I spent the rest of the war there, having to build Spitfires, which I'm quite proud of. At least that helped to bring about victory in a small way.
Perhaps the reason the Kitchener camp isn't remembered is because it was a short-lived transit camp, a stepping stone allowing people to cross from danger to safety. And stepping stones are easily forgotten once you've reached the other side. But without the Kitchener camp, there is no doubt thousands of lives would have been swept away.
I was born the day I came to England, really reborn.
I do appreciate and I do not forget the fact that the British were instrumental in allowing me to come into this country, to save myself from almost certain death.
The Kitchener camp was a fantastic place, a sad place in many ways, but also, yes, it gave us a future.
When I'm older, I'm definitely going to speak about it with my children because I want them to know how lucky they are, where they've come from initially.
I don't brood about it, but round about Holocaust Memorial time, one does think about it more.
Luck was my great friend, my guardian angel, and ever has been since.
Now, if you want any more information about tonight's show, then you can go to our Kent or Sussex websites. You can also watch the whole show again by clicking on the iPlayer, bbc.co.uk/Inside Out. Coming up next week. Is the health of airport workers being put at risk here in the South East?
We've got to make sure that we're preserving the health of our workers at the airport.
Men get eating disorders too, but is enough being done?
The doctor didn't really pick on my symptoms because, they just thought,